So this account, John Code writes, still feels awkward to talk about, but there's an entire generation of young white guys who have been shut out of the job market simply because they're white and male. 1 year after graduation, I got hired to work an entry-level role at a fairly well-known New York City museum. They ghosted me after I followed up to submit my hiring paperwork. And 2 weeks later, the person who referred me to the job told me her boss wanted to hire a person of color instead. Don't we all of us who are white males, don't we all have stories like this? Don't we? The following year, a friend referred me to an entry-level job in book publishing, assuring me I'd at least get an interview. After I submitted my resume, she followed up with HR and told me they were only interviewing diverse candidates for the role, which means, of course, non-white. I bet most white guys my age have stories like these. Yeah, like I just said. And not all Gen Z white guys want to work at, I don't know, the FP, what is that? The Financial Post? Palantir, or whatever companies have not been discriminating against us for the past decade and bragging about that they don't discriminate against white guys. I have seen the CEO of Palantir, who's a friend of Elon Musk's, give very pro-white male interviews on this. I don't think I have any of those lined up for this show, which is too bad. Next time I cover the topic, I'll include one of those. He's a guy with the crazy hair. For all the ink spilled over groypers and gooners, those are the derogatory terms they use for the Nick F audience, and Gen Z's crisis of meaning, few writers have truly reckoned with the dispossession of white males in first world nations that's been wrought by DEI. And apparently someone wrote a lengthy article about this. The Lost Generation by Jacob Savage. This guy says, this is the most important article of the year, highlights below, but you should read it in full. We're not going to read it in full, but I am going to share some of these highlights in the yellow here. It's tempting to wave it all away as secular decline, white men abandoning fields that were losing status or economic value, but the timing doesn't line up. The sharpest declines in opportunity for younger white men didn't happen during the rolling crisis of the past few years. They were baked in during the mid-2010s. When new media was expanding coverage, universities were growing, and Hollywood was at peak TV, which raises some uncomfortable questions. Is the media more trusted now than a decade ago? Is Hollywood making better films and television, meaning since white men have been excluded? Is academia more respected? Have these institutions become stronger since they systematically excluded an entire cohort, white men, or did abandoning meritocracy accelerate their decline? Here's another snippet. The doors seemed to close everywhere and all at once. In 2011, the year I moved to LA, white men were 48% of lower level TV writers. By 2024, they accounted for just 11.9%, 80% drop. The Atlantic's editorial staff went from 53% male and 89% white in 2013 to 36% male and 66% white in 2024. White men fell from 39% of tenured track positions in the humanities at Harvard in 2014 to 18%, so dropped by half. In retrospect, 2014 was the hinge, the year that DEI, anti-white maleness, became institutionalized across American space. Going to go on to the next one. Matthew Schmidt says, beginning in 2014, prestige industries decided they urgently needed to diversify, meaning not hire young white men. They didn't purge established boomers. The older white guys were secure. Instead, they did everything possible to avoid hiring white millennial men. This is the story of a generation derailed by DEI. And by the way, that makes it a double-edged sword, because what the DEI people could do when they didn't go after the older white men in management, they could point at those guys and say, oh, look, it's the white men who control everything. They're in charge of everything. They're the CEOs. They're the senior partners in law school. White men have all the advantages. Therefore, we should advocate for more black people to get hired. Well, maybe the old boomers at the top of management had all the advantages, but the young white men don't. They have nothing. They have nothing, and they're the ones being damaged by these policies. Christian Hines writes, read this and recognize what they have done to us. White men are the eternal enemy of the left. We are their ultimate theological foe. We are the source of all the evils in the world. We are their secular Satan, their Emmanuel Goldstein, their object of the 2-minute hate from George Orwell's 1984. Except 2-minute hate never ends. With progressivism, the ritual demonization and institutional discrimination has no off switch. It's a never-ending avalanche of explicitly hatred dressed up with a bunch of flowery language about diversity and inclusion that masks the left's utter disdain for us under the guise of universal human rights and restorative justice. We are the mortal enemies because we are perhaps the only people in all of Western civilization who don't need progressivism at all and never will. Every demographic group has some geniuses in it, but we're talking about what you can expect from the population generally. So the high IQ people, they don't have need of DEI. They're going to succeed anyway, unless, of course, they can be kneecapped by the politics of DEI. They don't see us, he writes, as dependents because we never have been. We are, in fact, the only people that the left believes they can afford to exclude. So they will. Our only purpose to them is to be their eternal punching bag, their designated enemy in the Schmittian sense of the term. At best, we are to be permanently disempowered and left as a tax farm for the coalition of losers and lunatics to leech off of. At worst, we're to be gradually, not so gradually, eliminated from society entirely. Since 2014, it has become blatantly apparent to tens of millions of young white men that we are the left's ultimate and existential enemy. Most of us never wanted this. Some of us even identified as liberals ourselves when we were younger. But the left has gone out of their way to declare us as their enemy and treat us like monsters as a matter of both moral principle and political expediency. And while we might not have wished to view these people as our enemy, we also had no say in the matter. The only choice we have now is whether we will return the declaration of enmity as a matter of self-defense, or you either do that or you die, or whether we will allow the left to steamroll us out of fear of being seen as the bad guy in the eyes of people who already hate us. Christopher Rufo responds to this content by writing, DEI delenda est. Delenda est. And I saw delenda est. And by the way, Christopher Rufo is an interesting guy. You should check him out on X. Maybe consider giving him a follow. But delenda est is Latin. And my brain short-circuited. So I read this as Greek from a Greek phrase about the Trojan War, having to do with the Trojan Horse. And of course, we all know the story of sorry, I didn't switch it over. DEI delenda est. We all know the story of the Trojan Horse, right? So Troy was being besieged. The Greeks couldn't get through the walls. So the Greeks built a gift. And the gift was this giant wooden horse. And they presented it to Troy, and Troy opened up the gates and let the giant wooden horse roll in. And it turned out the giant wooden horse was full of Greek troops who were now inside the walls of Troy, and the city of Troy fell to the Greeks. That's the story. That's what came to my mind when I saw delenda est, and I was thinking DEI as a Trojan horse. That kind of makes conceptual sense to me. That's pretty clever. It purports to do a good thing, right? We're just helping out the less advantaged. But what it's really doing is collapsing first world society. That's how I read that. And I was wrong. I was thinking of a completely different phrase. So I was actually thinking of this phrase from Greek, Timeo Danios Edonia Ferentes, which translates as, I fear the Greeks even when bearing gifts. And you can see the allusion here to the Trojan horse. That's why the thumbnail for today's show has a Trojan horse in it. But that's not what this refers to. Delenda est is from a different civilization and a different time of history. It's from Latin. It's from Rome, the Roman Empire. From the phrase Carthago delenda est, a Roman senator, and what that translates as is Carthage must be destroyed. Because we had these ongoing wars between Rome and Carthage, at least three big ones, and that oftentimes it looked like Carthage was going to win. Rome was really on the ropes. Hannibal was doing a good job for Carthage. But when Rome finally got the upper hand, Rome said, all right, we're wiping these guys out. This is where the phrase, the salting of the earth, happened. I don't think they literally salted the earth around Carthage, but they ensured it was completely destroyed as a civilization. And so when Chris Rufo says DEI delenda est, he's saying DEI must be destroyed. So there's my dirty confession. There you go. And you got to learn a little Greek and Latin today.